Hello, welcome everyone. This is Ukraine Media Center at Ukrinform. It is 222nd day of our fight for our freedom. Let us discuss the situation in Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. We have with us Hryhoriy Plachkov, the head of Ukraine's nuclear regulator in the previous years, 2017-2020. So, can you please comment about the situation? We know that the CEO has lost his position. Yes, he has been abducted, and this can only be perceived as an act of nuclear terrorism. This is the highest licensed official at Zaporizhia ZNPP, the person whose decisions defined the main issues about the nuclear and radiation security. So that's the key person managing this complex and dangerous infrastructure as nuclear power plant. Right now, all the units are in the called halt mode. The energy supply to Zaporizhia ZNPP has been restored, but the occupation is still going on. We hear about the inhumane attitude to the personnel. There are intentions of taking the ZNPP under Russian jurisdiction, so the situation is still tense for the last 6 months. What can be the future developments of this situation? What can we expect? Well, it's difficult to actually tell what we can expect of the occupiers. There was information about the mines being used and damaging the transformator equipment. We cannot know what the occupiers intend to do, and we see that the Russian Federation is still intending to take over Zaporizhia ZNPP under their jurisdiction, or making sure that it produces electricity for the Crimea or the united power grid of the Russian Federation. What about the visit of Mr. Grossi? What are the expectations? Well, he is going to try to expand his mission from 2 to 3 representatives or more. He's intending to establish a demilitarized zone around Zaporizhia ZNPP. In my opinion, that's the only opportunity to prevent the catastrophe on the ZNPP. Indeed, the ZNPP needs to be deoccupied and demilitarized. That's the only solution. We know that units 1 and 2 were damaged, and also they are mistreating the staff. The electricity is available now, but it can disappear tomorrow. So the main task is to make sure that Zaporizhia ZNPP is safe for the world and Ukraine. What are the additional security measures that need to be taken in other ZNPPs as well? Coming back to Mr. Grossi's visit, indeed, there can be some permanent missions established to our ZNPPs, including Chernobyl ZNPP, which also houses lots of nuclear material. And also we need to apply pressure on all the international actors, making sure that we also exclude, if possible, Russians from taking decisions in IAEA or the UN. There is a very good example in the Association of Civil Aviation, Russians have been excluded already, and also in terms of non-proliferation and nuclear issues, they have to be excluded as well. Your questions, dear colleagues? Victoria Nakonechna, Ukrinform. I have a couple of questions related to our today's conversation, so I will ask them one by one. Question one is about this abduction of the CEO. Since he has been moved to the government-controlled area, can this be seen as the steps of the occupiers to establish their full management over the NPP? Well, after the annexation of the region, we know that the Russians have installed on many infrastructural enterprises their own management, making sure that people start working for their newly established enterprises, working for the non-government controlled territory. So since Mr. Murashov is in the government controlled territory, we need to wait for his comments, because it's difficult for me to answer for him, but such an option is also considered in the expert environment. Speaking of the international law, it's difficult to tell how the Russians will attempt to legalize it, because these active nuclear units and materials, they are guaranteed by Ukraine, and how they will manage to redirect the licenses, it's very difficult to tell. And will there be any influence on the situation if the IATA mission is expanded? Because the two inspectors that are there right now make no difference. Well, they are at least a kind of a fuse there. I believe the very fact that they are there is efficient in and of itself, because we can see that it helps to prevent the access to information, and they are informing some their management about the situation. So the main task here is to expand this mission, which Mr. Grossi will attempt to do. So that's the only answer I have for this. And the last question here: what types of sanctions can be realistically imposed on Rosatom? Because some hotheads are speaking of excluding Russia from decision making in IATA and also UN Security Council. How realistic is this, and is it possible to somehow implement this under the existing approaches in these organizations? Well, there was this step-by-step approach, and we have already heard about commercial aviation examples. So why are we not implementing it in other areas, such as, for instance, nuclear power or health, etc.? Indeed, the architecture of nuclear security has not worked. The conventions on nuclear issues, nor the Geneva Convention has stopped the Russians. And, for instance, the Convention on the safe use of nuclear power and treatment of the nuclear materials, and the physical protection, and the non-proliferation agreement. So if Russians are behaving like this, the world has no choice but to exclude this occupier country from these serious organizations. Unfortunately, there are no other organizations of this type, and IATA is the only organization with a technical mandate for nuclear power and non-proliferation of nuclear material. And what about the new models? Are they being developed by international organizations? If we see that the current configurations don't work, well, that there is a statement from 50 countries which was developed during the General Assembly of IATA. There is also the statement of the Polish government, also through the IATA, to exclude Russians, but our government has also has to be taken part, because for some reason our regulators are not heard on the international arena to such an extent as, for instance, the Polish delegation. So I believe that the Cabinet of Ministers, the Office of the President, and also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs need to apply pressure on the aggressor country. There is no other solution but the demilitarization and deoccupation of Zaporizhzhia and ZNPP. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. This was Hryhoriy Plachkov, the head of Ukraine's nuclear regulators in 2017-2021. Thank you for joining us. We believe our armed forces. Glory to Ukraine.